Cool. And let's just good. So, welcome back to another episode of Primetime Live. As always, Shay here with Jaden. Jaden, how you doing today?
Great. How about you, Shay?
Going good as well. Preseason football actually kicked off. You watch about a quarter and a half. You watch about two, maybe 3/4 of it instead of the about a quarter you watch the Hall of Fame game. Enjoyable. It was fun, but we're getting focused on Miami football. I mean, we'll talk about him later. Cam Ward looked pretty nice, I gotta say.
Yeah, he was the one I was looking for. Him and Shadur's debuts. Those were I was hyped for those. And then as a Jets fan, watching that first quarter, I was feeling great. It felt good. It's like we're right there, but they just keep giving us like these tastes, and we want the whole thing. We want it all. We're like what three Sundays away, from week 1 against Notre Dame. So we're right there. It's all right in
It's
front of
right
us.
around the corner. Real football. I mean, we're pads are starting to come on
Yep.
during
Yep.
fall camp. Things are starting to get a little more real over in fall camp, and it's going to be exciting to see how things kind of progress. But I think first thing on the docket to talk about is a very similar ranking. We had the coaches poll last week, and now we have the AP poll this week. Looking at Miami here with the preseason AP poll. Jaden, Miami, right there at 10, just right where they were. Clemson a little bit higher, Notre Dame a little bit lower, as some other notable pieces close by. What any takeaways from this?
Yeah, the Clemson love, I'm okay with it. I had 3 ACC teams. I would say that makes sense. I like Miami at 10. Honestly, I was a little when I saw the coaches poll at 10, I was like, could they drop a little bit in the preseason AP poll? Them staying at 10, I love it. I love the love that they're giving us. I think they notice as well that Miami's more balanced this year. That with Beck and with the tools they have around them, with the revamped defense and a pretty good schedule. I think Miami has a chance to kind of like shock the world and do what be a good team. I think like that stays in that top 10. And this is Miami's first official top 10 appearance since 2018. 2018 they were 8th. So I love that love. And then you're looking at it from a schedule standpoint, and you're seeing right away that Miami's got 3 top 16 opponents right there. Notre
Yep.
Dame at 6, UF at 15, SMU at 16, and in the event of a potential AC championship game, Clemson at 4. That's 4. Miami wins. I keep saying this, that if Miami wins maybe 2 of those 3 games, they're in a pretty clear spot to make the CFP or make the ACC championship game pretty easily.
Yeah. And even they have those games, but there's some other teams even getting votes here that Miami's going to play.
Yes.
Louisville, FSU in there, Pitt in there. Kind of some other teams to kind of look out for in terms of teams that the college football landscape's looking at in terms of fighting with Miami throughout the season. Also, as always, got to shout out Falconer. Quick early on super sticker for $1.99. Appreciate it as always. We'll get to the helicopters later, but for now, sticking on topic. Yeah, but you like it. I think we were a little bit concerned if like the AP poll would look down on Miami a little bit more than the coaches poll did, but to have them right there at 10 is a pretty good start to the pretty good start to the season. I believe Miami ended 18th at the end of the year, so you look at how there's a lot more respect to the balance on this team now going
Mhm.
into this season, even with Cam Ward departing, even with the offense kind of reshaping itself a lot. It's a good place to start, especially when you look at the team that they're surrounded by. It's like early on the college football world sees Miami as a team that could definitely make a playoff push.
Yeah, and one thing I love a lot is that if Miami wins, some of these really good games against Notre Dame or against UF, and you can kind of look at it to the end of the season, say that Mario and Co won 2 top 15 games because these are 2 teams that started the season in top 15. That's pretty good, at least in terms of the way that you want to look at it from like a standpoint. If Miami wins these games, these are some tough games. These are the games you want to play, the games that the fan base is like looking at every week and saying, we got to win these games. We've been talking smack to these teams all week. We got to beat them. And honestly, as much as I think Notre Dame at 6 makes sense, second, they just lost in the national championship game, all that. They do have a lot. I would argue they might have a little more concern than Miami does. If you've been following along with what Notre Dame's got going on, that they're in a QB battle, a pretty big QB battle. CJ Carr is competing with I can't remember his name, and they're going back and forth. And they've been going back and forth, and they're unsure who's going to be the starting quarterback week one. That's already gives Miami a little bit of an advantage. I would say it helps Miami out a little bit more. That Miami looks more certain than Notre Dame, and that whoever is starting for Notre Dame has to enter into a really hostile environment week one at quarterback. That's not an
Mhm.
easy thing to do.
Yeah, to follow up, Kenny Minchie's the other guy in that
Yes,
QB
yes,
battle. Yeah, but like it's, I think that is something to. We'll talk about the schedule as the weeks go on, as we get closer to Notre Dame, and kind of, we'll tap in more to what's going on with this Notre Dame QB battle. But we talk about it every week. Is that if this defense is like a dramatic step better, which I think a lot of people think, and I think we think it'll be, that makes it a lot better given the fact that Notre Dame does not know what QB they're playing week one, as it looks like right now. And if they do, CJ Carr is a guy who has no, considerable experience, and so there's a lot of moving parts for Notre Dame, especially a tough task for a team to go in with a guy getting his first reps at the highest level on a primetime game to start the season. Which I think could be a little bit of concerns. Obviously, you got to give Notre Dame a respect at number six,
of course, of course.
starting off the season because they were just in the national championship. But it looks like a tougher match than it might end up being for Miami, potentially. If their quarterback, if they actually do have a quarterback issue, if CJ Carr or Kenny Minchie aren't necessarily ready to start week one, and this defense is as much better as we all think it's going to be, then it's a really good way to start your season for Miami, where you take down a number six opponent that might not necessarily be a number six caliber opponent to start off the season, and then that's just going to, regardless, you have that notch on your belt as the season continues to progress. We'll go through the schedule, but then you go to Florida, you play Florida, SMU, take on those high level teams in the top 20, in the top 25. Some other teams getting votes, as we talked about. I think there's a lot to look forward to for Miami this season.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, I mean, it's kind of been the biggest, kind of one of the things that we've been talking about a lot of, is this Mario Cristobal's best chance to, lead a team to the ACC championship? And I'd argue it is. I think it is. And I only think it is because of the way that Miami has the schedule set up, the roster that he has. If he had this level, if he had this defense, or he had some guys in the 2023 defense on last year's defense, it would have, that team goes to the CFP pretty easily. And you kinda look at them like, "All right, well, this season he's got a better defense, the offense got a little bit worse. All right." I still think that this is probably the best team he's coached or he's gonna have at Miami, and it's a team that you look at and you're like, "All right, well, they gotta do something." They like, 2 loss season probably has to be the minimum. Probably has to be, like, the worst case scenario for the team if you wanna call it somewhat of a successful season.
Yeah, I completely agree. Um, like I said a few times, we'll get into the schedule a little bit later on, but I think the schedule might be harder than it was last year, but I think because of the balance this team might have and some of the regression that you might see from a team like SMU or Notre Dame, that it could end up being favorable for Miami different spots, and I think it could work. I think it could work a lot to Miami's favor. As the season progresses and as this team progresses, especially having a team like SMU later on in the season. I think is really important for Miami, not necessarily having to worry about a team like that, that just contended for the ACC championship, like early on in the season when the team might be going through some changes. Um, but yeah, overall, I think it's definitely Cristobal's best chance so far, at least.
Yeah.
You could, yeah, I think it'll be tough. I think it's tough just because it's hard to just take out of your mind the fact that Cam Ward was the QB last year, and like, yeah, it's hard. It's hard to predict Carson Beck's going to be even anywhere near what Cam Ward was last year, but I think given the balance on this team, it might be his best chance so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the last thing I wanna just maybe touch on the AP poll. I mean, in a college football sense, week 1, unbelievable.
Oh yeah,
Texas, Ohio State, 1 versus 3. Clemson, LSU, 4 versus 9. And then to cap it off, 6v10 Notre Dame, Miami. You can't beat that. That's
it's
unbelievable.
such an electric first weekend. Do you know where kickoff's going to be or college football game day is going to be? Do we have
Week
they?
week 1 is in, I think it's in whoever's hosting Texas, Ohio State. That's
Okay,
week
gotcha.
1.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's
then
going to be electric to watch.
yeah.
An electric day in college football, just between all. those crazy matchups. Really stacked week 1 slate, which you got, as a football fan, you gotta love. You gotta
You
love
gotta
that.
love it. It feels like, I mean, this sport is at its peak right now in terms of entertainment with the stuff that you have right here. Like it's incredible. I think that we're looking at an incredible slate of games coming up soon. Can't wait.
100% can't wait for it. And just 20 days, college football is
Wow.
finally back,
Wow.
right under 3 weeks. And it's going to be fun to see Miami. But what else was fun to see is Cam Ward and some Hurricanes over the course of this preseason. Jaden, what did you like? What did you like from Cam?
Well, so I liked his the way that he kind of battled a little bit. So first drive against Tampa Bay this on Saturday, go 3 and out. Literally nothing. Really bad. I mean, Tennessee had nothing.
From the Titans
Um
next door.
Second drive, right? Cam looks good. Like it was like bad first drive, but the second drive, I thought he looked more composed. I thought he looked stronger. I thought he looked like he was, a little more gelled, ready to play. There were some clips that you can watch where you're like, this is the guy I remember seeing at Miami, and like again, the first drive looked
First drive was a
really
little bit rough, but then this
really
next one, touchdown drive,
yeah, great
march
throw
down the
right there to
field.
Calvin Ridley. Easily finds him right away. The 27-yard gain right there. Next play, we find Ridley again. Yep,
They got a
another
good connection early on, it looks like,
yeah.
which I think is
That was
really
what? I think it was 3 catches for 50 yards for Calvin
yeah,
Ridley
three
today.
catch for 50 yards, touchdown drive to start the game, march him down the field.
Yeah, that was the guy I remember seeing in Miami. He looked really composed. He looked strong. Ended off with the touchdown drive on a run with Tony Pollard. Does a little celebration. Like that's the Cam Ward I remember seeing.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool to see him play well, play strong. I'm begging the Titans let him play as well as he did because I
Don't yeah, like it'd suck so much if they messed him up.
they
Yeah,
cannot
like
ruin Cam
I
Ward.
think I like some of the things I saw because Cam he got some plays where he got to sit back there, just kind of do
Yep,
his thing where he
yep,
just completely stops moving before firing the ball. So which I love to see because that was one of his like signature things last year where he was just so confident in his protection, so confident in the offense around him that he just kind of freezes up, doesn't move, and then just fires it. Like
yeah,
I love to see like a little bit of a snippet, but it was I mean we talked about it earlier. Like it was a really fun weekend for rookie QBs overall. I mean,
yeah. It was.
Cam was doing his thing. Shador did his thing during his reps, um, and then Jackson Dart had a crazy touchdown. Guy in his face drops like a 30-yard bomb. Um, like even Jalen Milrow, you got to see some little fun runs out of him,
Yeah,
and then even Tyler Shuck threw a pick six, but then he also threw a 50-yard touchdown.
yeah.
So you give and take there. What I do want to see more as this preseason goes on, though, is I want to see more of X.
Of course,
Play. I haven't kept up fully with the Titans camp, so maybe he's not necessarily repping with the ones, but let sneak him in there a few plays
he's
here and
still
there.
he's still battling for a roster spot from what I know,
Yeah.
and I know obviously he's got Cam's backing, so he might be able to stay on the team.
Hmm.
But he only had 2 targets, no catches in the preseason game. I really want him to ball out over there. Hoping it works out, but I can't help but look at Cam Ward playing in the Titans and just say, I hate this. I hate that 2024 defense with all my heart,
Oh,
with
100%.
every ounce of my body. The fact that this team had Cam Ward on that team putting up 45 points every night, and for them to lose, to not even make the playoffs, not even make the AC championship game, to get the Pop Tart Bowl because you couldn't your defense couldn't get a couple stops. Your defense couldn't what allow 40 points. They kept allowing over 30 points a game. Unbelievable. Just it irks me. It does irk me. And I'm hoping that can't happen. That can't happen next season. Can't happen.
Yeah. I mean, in both ways. I hope Cam gets the best out of his team, and I hope Miami, that defense is not as bad as it was this year. So, in the case Carson Beck has a special year as well, that we don't ruin it, with future defense. But yeah, some other interesting pieces. Andres Borregales, for my Pats, makes some kicks. He's in a tight battle with Parker Romo. Obviously, I want to see Andy may win that battle, come out as a starting kicker for the Patriots. But I will say, to Parker Romo nailed like a 57-yarder. It's part of that 48-18 victory. Yep, preseason means everything, people. It does. The Patriots are going to the Super Bowl. And Andres Borregales will be their starting kicker.
Hey, I watched Justin Fields play last week, and I said that he's the starting quarterback. I think he's my franchise quarterback right now.
Oh, there you go. For now and forever, Justin Fields, Jets
But you know
franchise
what? I will
QB.
say this about the Jets have 3 Miami players on defense. They got Kiko
Oh yeah,
Mallinois, they got Tyler Barron, and they got Leonard Taylor. Leonard
look
Taylor's
at
a
that.
dog. I don't know what the hell Leonard Taylor was doing in 2023. Leonard Taylor's an absolute dog right now for the Jets. He forced a force fumble off Malik Willis, and that led to a touchdown. Awesome play. He looked really good. I can't lie, and he actually might be a rotational piece in that defense again this season. So
Mm-hmm.
good for him. I know
I mean,
Barron.
that D line does get after it with a
It
bunch
does.
of
It
guys,
does.
so it'll be fun to see if Leonard Taylor can kind of carve out a role for himself
Yeah.
over there.
And if Barron and Kiko were playing as well, I know they didn't play a whole lot, but they both got 2 tackles apiece. If those two can, it'd be pretty cool to have some good Jets playing again, or some good Hurricanes that play for the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be fun to kind of see these guys all across the league. I think that's what the best, to get on a more serious note about it, like building programs and going back to that point, having guys have success in the pros, is huge, because then it's like if you have a bunch of big time Hurricanes coming out playing well all around the league, then that's just more of building your brand as a talent developer. Is like, oh, we have X, Y, and Z playing all across the league, a million different people. Because obviously Miami, I think, is second all time in Hall of Fame selections, I
yes,
believe,
yes,
in the NFL. So, but not necessarily as many of recent. I know Devin Hester got into there last year, but you just consistently churning out pros. Thinking about the Bears, you have Tyreek Stevenson, who I was hearing about Dolphins training camp. I think he was wrecking shop over there, for when the Bears and Dolphins during joint practices. Another guy, big Miami name, second round pick, who played phenomenally in his rookie season, not necessarily as well as second season, but still guys to look at throughout
yeah.
the league.
I think we do have that in tight end at least. I mean, all time, of course,
Oh
we
yes,
have it.
Arroyo.
So all time we have it with the Greg Wilsons of the world, Kellen Winslow, guys like that, Jimmy Graham, and currently David Njoku and Elijah Arroyo.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking, I mean, and then D end, we're kind of seeing that a little bit with Rosso and Jalen Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
You're hoping though, because the first thing I thought of was Ohio State, because everyone mentions Ohio State and how they're developing guys into the league, but you're also watching how well they're playing in the league. When you watch Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and all these receivers play so well, you're looking
Mm-hmm.
at like everyone wants to go to Ohio State now to be at wide receiver U. It's turned into wide receiver U, or even LSU with Chase and Jettas. That's another school that's got great receivers, great group of guys over there. So you want Miami to, if you want the guys in the pros to ball out, it'll trickle down where the guys that they see them come out and like, I watch Cam Ward play, I want to be like Cam Ward, go to Miami. You want to see that happen more and more. And it kind of starts with what you're seeing in the league. So you're rooting for these guys to really ball out. So that kind of makes Mario's job a little bit easier in the recruiting world.
Yeah, absolutely. The more guys ball in the league, the more you're going to see guys balling out. I mean, the more you're going to see guys want to come here when they realize you have a chance to make it to the pros when you come here.
Yeah.
So I think it's just rooting for Cam Ward, rooting for X, rooting for Andy, rooting for CC, not CC, Kiki Mawinoa,
Cam Kinchens is
all those
balling
guys
over there in LA.
Huh? Say that again. Oh
Cam
yeah, Cam
Kinchens
Kinchens, another guy who
balling
had
with the
a phenomenal
Rams.
rookie season last year, for Miami. Not for Miami, but for the Rams last year. Especially
Yeah.
came on late in that year as their starting safety. Played a massive role for that Rams team that was just like just a little bit away from like being taken on the Eagles. So
Yeah.
another big part of that. I think the more you see guys like that ball out and play huge roles in the league, the more guys are going to want to come here to potentially make their ways to the pros. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, we're
speaking of
speaking about
recruiting,
recruits. Yeah, we're sitting on the same level.
so I'm saying, so yeah. But speaking of recruits, interestingly, Miami does have a big recruit coming to this Notre Dame game. Um, Derek Cooper is still going to Notre Dame, week one to open the season for Miami. Jaden, what do you think about this? Is it a big deal? Is it no deal? Should we even care necessarily? Or
It's kind of the way that college football's been going with the open recruitment. I commit to Texas, I sign my NIL, I do all that, but I'm still going to keep my recruitment open. It's odd. It's definitely what the way that it is right now, and it's not like Miami's the only team I think he's going to visit. I heard from On3 that he might see Georgia, and he might go back to FSU and all these schools. I have no idea what it means. I wish I could tell you. In if I were to say right now if where he goes to school, I still think he ends up at Texas because Texas probably gave him the most amount of money. But I do think it's interesting. I mean, he is a guy from Fort Lauderdale, probably grew up watching the Canes and all that. Maybe he just wanted to watch his team play one last time and against Notre Dame. Free trip, free recruitment. Like, can't hurt him. Can't hurt him at all. But it is interesting that he has not shut down his recruitment 100%, even with the commitment to Texas on July 28th.
Yeah, yeah, definitely interesting. I won't say it's nothing just because, we were talking about it a few weeks ago when we were talking about, sorry, I'm thinking about the one corner who reclassed and the safety Miami brought in,
Mhm.
kind of talking about how there's recruitment's kind of always open now. You gotta stay on the recruiting trail even if you have guys, quote unquote, locked in, just because, things change throughout a season, especially if it's between an off season, coaches might leave, coaches might stay, guys who brought them there might not necessarily be there the entire time. So you got to constantly keep on the recruiting ground, and then if anything works out, like maybe Texas's RB coach or gets poached or whatever, and Derek Cooper's like maybe not necessarily. Kind of keeping a good connection with guys, even if they've not necessarily committed to, even if they've not committed to your program, is still big. Which is why I think Miami's still easily welcoming Derek
Mhm.
Cooper home. I mean, for this home game, he is from the state. He is from our backyard, and so you want to keep a guy like that around the program enough where if things change in his head, maybe he's swayed to stay, come flip his commit and end up at Miami. We'll see as time goes on. I don't think it's nothing, but I don't think it's like a big. It's not a big something, but it's
Mhm.
definitely not like, it's not. It's not. It's definitely. It's not nothing. It's not
Yeah.
nothing. I'll say.
Continuing, but that's the thing. I think Texas has to continue their recruiting of him, which is to me just how the way how it's changed completely. It's just entirely different than what it once was, where it's like, oh, I've committed to the school, but I'm not 100% that like I will be enrolling at that school next year. It's just the way that it is, and these universities have to just continue to recruit them as if they haven't fully committed. So that's just how the way the sport has gone. Something could absolutely happen where he maybe decommits or he goes somewhere else. Although I do, again, crystal ball right now, where does he go? I still think he ends up at Texas, but it is something to look out for, be potentially interested in. Miami beats down on Notre Dame. Could that change something? If
Hey,
Texas
you
were
know
to
what I
lose
mean?
by 50 to Ohio
Fletcher and
State,
Lyle, 40 carries each. Pound the rock
yeah.
at
It's
Hard
I mean,
Rock.
it's interesting that he chose to go to Miami, Notre Dame over Texas, Ohio State. That's
Yeah,
that's
that's another
something.
thing to think about. Maybe it's just because it's closer. It'll be during this,
Of
but he
course,
still has. I mean, he still has this whole senior season of high school
that's
to
a good
play.
point. Yep,
So that might be why it might be local, but you never know. I mean, I think Texas would easily welcome him to go watch that game against Ohio State, but you know, but maybe it's just because he
yeah,
wants to stay close with school games, playing high school still. So probably that's why. But still, interesting that he did choose to go to that one
yeah.
instead of Texas Ohio State, which they probably could have just flown him out for the weekend. I mean,
Could
Texas is.
have. It could be. It literally could mean literally anything. It could be
Mhm.
nothing. Could be something. Like we gotta wait and watch as the season transpires between I guess all sides: Georgia, Texas, FSU, Miami, and then his own high school season, his senior year. So
Mhm.
there's just a lot of moving pieces. But you would imagine that at the moment, like Texas is still his top school, and maybe it's just the fact that he has school, and he was like, "Well, I'll just go 15 minutes to Miami to watch
Yeah.
the game for free." It could be
So
as simple as that.
could be as simple as that. Could be
Yeah,
anything
could
really.
be anything.
Could be a million different things, but I think it's definitely not nothing in that it's definitely good. It's definitely good that even though he's not committed to Miami, that they're still taking him on visits and stuff like that, just because you never know what could happen. And I think it's good to just kind of have that in your back pocket in case he decides to reopen his commitment and potentially flip. So
Yeah. One thing
we will.
Mario has said in the past a lot is that he is big on continuing recruitments for a lot of guys, no matter if they've committed to a school or not. He's said it on numerous occasions that he has to continue his recruitment. I believe one person he did it on was Jackson Cantwell, who had originally committed to Georgia, and Miami just kept committing. They kept persisting on him. Lamar Brown, I know they didn't get him, but they were insisting on like maybe he does come to Miami and all that, and they were recruiting them hard. So which is it probably entirely of what makes Mario Criswell such a great recruiter. So you imagine he's probably doing the same with Derek Cooper, and if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah. So hopefully for the Canes, it doesn't end up working out. Would be a
Yeah,
sick player to add, especially
unbelievable.
5-star, great player from your own backyard. Would be a great addition
Yep.
if they were able to flip him, but not. I don't necessarily think this is too much to say either way on whether or not he'd flip or not to
Yeah,
Miami. But
absolutely.
what you do know you have to do, you do have to come out and have good showing, just in case that does make him reconsider some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but as we get closer, we have a little bit more on fall camp updates from Canes Insight. Sebastian Font pads are now officially on, so a bunch of people tweeting about it. Jaden, what have you kind of seen out of fall camp and heard?
One thing, probably the biggest thing, again, shout out our boy Sebastian Font, good coworker of ours, does a great job at Canes Insight. Please follow him on X and all socials. He one thing that I remember he was talking a lot about was the depth at linebacker, and I think that's one of the more interesting things that I'm seeing is that they love what they have there between Muhammad Toure and with Saint there again and Popo Aguirre and all these guys that they have as the linebacker group. They have so many guys over there, and I imagine that depth is going to be a big help in the Corey Heatherman system that loves just subbing out guys, keeping guys healthy and all that. So you do look at that and you think that's a positive. And on the other side of the ball, one of the concerns that a lot of Miami fans did have was, you lose Jalen Rivers to the draft. Can Markel Bell kind of slot in that role? And right away, he stepped in and he's done a great job, according to what we see at camp, that he's winning a lot of reps over some of the guys in the D line. I don't know exactly who they are in the D line, but he's whoever he's facing because Marco Bell has an integral role this year as Beck's blindside. So he's got a big job to do, and if he's winning some good reps against a very good D line with Miami, you're hoping that will continue as the season goes forward. And the last thing I would like to say is probably with the receiver battle, as we were mentioning that Carson Beck's got a lot of guys to throw to, and one of them is in the slot that we're still looking between. You have Ray Joseph, who I believe is a redshirt sophomore, the transfer Tony Johnson, and Malachi Tony, the freshman. All three of them are in a slot receiver battle right now for the top spot. It's awesome to see Malachi Tony from the jump playing really well. But it's a good battle that Shannon Dawson has, and it's a good battle that Beck is going to be able to throw to these guys, build a rapport with these guys, and as we move forward, hopefully continue to build that chemistry that helps Miami for Notre Dame and for the rest of the season.
Yeah, especially just harping back onto that slot battle. We kind of talk about it a bunch with Shannon Dawson, and when we preview the wide receivers, that slot role is very important for his type of offenses. When you think about what he did with X, and then what he did with Tank Dell when Dawson was at Houston, so kind of seeing that kind of play out, whether it's Tony Johnson, whether it's Ray, whether it's why am I blanking?
Malachi
Malachi.
Tony.
I think but going what you said, it's really good to see the freshmen competing very early on. And we talked about it last week when we were talking about Josh Moore having a role, being this big body X receiver on the outside that's kind of, setting the tone, working in, even in spurts, stuff you really want to see, especially as the pads come on. Seeing these younger receivers be able to keep up with the physicality and the athleticism of the higher level and kind of slowly carve roles for themselves, whether it's immediately or whether it's as the season progresses. Having those younger guys compete with these seniors that might be brought in to potentially hold down roles for a certain amount of time is really good to see. And the receiver group, I didn't look too much into it, but I saw one tweet kind of talking about how there might be a new QB2 moving on. Have you seen anything about how I'm assuming that's referring to Luke Nickel and
I
the
believe so. I have heard some of it. I haven't really paid much attention to it, but I have heard some of that stuff of Luke Nickel kind of maybe taking that spot at the QB2. But all that's still up in the air. And again, we probably won't know until probably when Miami starts playing, when they have like week 2 against Bethune-Cookman, or they have like one of those kind of games. So you don't know all of that yet, but you that is something. If it is Luke Nickel that is really taking that spot at QB2, it's an awesome thing to have for Miami. That this dude could easily take in the step as a redshirt freshman next season and be an absolute dog as their starting quarterback. And one thing I did see with Beck is that he plays a similar role like Cam, where he instead of throwing two guys, he's going to throw to guys in spaces. So in order to do that, you have to build a rapport with your teammates to know exactly where they are at all times. That's definitely going to be something I think we're gonna see some struggles with as in the beginning of the season, and as he continues to build that relationship, get better and better. So that one's a little bit more of a patience thing, but it is something to look out for if you do see Carson Beck maybe making a throw and it going nowhere because it's a miscommunication between teammates. But that's just something to watch out for as the season goes on. I know Beck is still having a very good camp. It's just something to watch out for.
I think it's why it's so important, kind of, for Miami to establish who's going to be playing for this receiving core early on, just
Yep.
because the quicker Beck can get on page with those guys, the quicker those guys know their roles and know where they need to be, and Beck can constantly work out, when they're making an in breaker, where on the field do I have to hit this, between zones and stuff like that. I think it's going to be I think Miami needs to figure that out sooner rather than later, just because the timing and operating this, Shan Dawson system in any kind of system, is timing is so important, especially for a QB like Beck, who doesn't necessarily have that ad lib portion that Cam Ward does, where having consistency and having a relationship and rapport with his receivers is going to be incredibly important. So I think for Miami, at least, you kind of have to pick who you're. You have have competition. Competition is perfect and all, but kind of establish who your guys are going to be on that in that receiving room as quick as possible, and figure out who those guys are going to be, just so Beck can be on the same page with them consistently. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing we saw last season, or at least entering last season, was Cam Ward, and the same thing. It was like, can Cam Ward easily build a rapport with X and with Jacoby and Sam Brown? Can he do that? How quickly can he do that? Can he do that effectively? All that, and then we were like, well, we just got to wait and see for Florida. And then against Florida, he was unbelievable. Now this is Carson Beck. Carson Beck's not Cam Ward. Can he do the same way? I wouldn't expect him to be in that same manner of like, wow, he is playing unbelievable right out of the gate. I wouldn't expect that. I would slow down on that, but you would focus on, is he making good throws? Is he accurate? Is he doing his job? You're gonna expect, and I would even see this on Notre Dame side of quarterbacks not looking the best because it's so early in the season and you have to build. It is harder and takes longer to build a rapport with your teammates and build chemistry with these guys.
hmm But I think it honestly is kind of a benefit of Miami bringing in these kind of veteran guys,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
um, around the receiving room, just because those guys have been there, and they kind of understand how to build chemistry and work with, a guy like CJ Daniels, who's worked with two different teams now. He can kind of show and kind of pass on information on how to really work with your quarterback, maybe the communication that goes into into building that rapport. And veteran guys who understand coverages, and when that maybe you have to sit in a zone instead of continuing to go around a longer drag route, stuff like that. I think that's kind of the benefit of Miami adding veterans around Carson Beck, as well as having these young guys potentially step into bigger roles. So.
Yeah, and that's where I think Alex Ballman comes into play because he's going to be a guy he's not going to be a guy that's going to be running up the middle of the field for a 50-yard touchdown. He's going to be a guy that's going to sit in the middle of the field. He's going to, on a 3rd and 3, Carson Beck looks one way, can't find him. He's going to throw to Ballman. He's going to try to get an easy first down. That's kind of what Ballman's going to try to be. And Beck loves throwing the tight ends. He loves his tight ends. He had in his best season, he had Brock Bowers. So he knows what it feels like to have really good tight end play, and he loves having good tight end play. You're going to expect to see Ballman and also Elijah
Lofton.
Lofton be that kind of player. So that's something to be looking forward to as well. I think that's going to be a benefit for Miami.
100%. I think that tight end room, we've kind of discussed it. It does feel like it's Miami's strength in terms of the passing game, especially. I mean, as we see these receivers, figure out where their roles and everything. I think we both are kind of in agreement that this tight end room could very be a stabilizing force for Miami in the passing game as Carson Beck figures out things as the season goes along with those receivers. And yeah, so I think last kind of point we want to hit is a little preview on the schedule. I believe, yeah. Jaden, I have some thoughts about it, but I mean, if you want to go where you think this is easy, where you think the schedule's hard. Quick thing, Miami does not leave the state of Florida until their 8th game of the season when they go to SMU. I think that's a huge benefit where, travel won't necessarily impact Miami up until, you start to hit your stride in the middle of the year. So what do you think about the schedule looking at it?
So I think about this. I've been thinking about it quite a bit actually. So the first thought you have to look at is the first 4 weeks of the season. That's Notre Dame, Bethune-Cookman, USF, and UF. Weeks 2 and 3 you could probably chalk up as wins, and then you look at Notre Dame and UF. I've been saying this kind of from the start that you in an ideal world, probably in a realistic world, Miami splits one of probably those 2 games. They go 1-1, and if you go 1-1, I can live with that. We can live with that. And then you go FSU on the road. It's automatically a tough game. I know you got the 2 buys, but it is always a tough game when you do go up to Tallahassee, no matter which version of FSU you're playing. I would honestly look at, in terms of what might scare me, is the last 2 games of the season, truthfully.
Mm-hmm.
The ending of the season at Virginia Tech, at Pitt to end the season, to me, that kind of scares me a little bit. It seems like a trap game. One of those 2 games, Virginia Tech and Pitt, both Big East rivals. They're 2 teams that they're playing the cold. You're gonna play some gritty football up there. It's definitely games that you're looking as a Miami fan. You're saying, if we're a 1-loss team and we're kind of on the bubble of the CFB at large, I really don't want to lose this game, especially against a team like Virginia Tech or Pitt. So those 2 games do scare me because they're both on the road back to back. But if we're looking at in terms of the schedule, the it's unbelievable that Miami doesn't leave the state of Florida until November, until
Yeah,
week 10. It's unbelievable. Love,
huge benefit for Miami there.
yeah, it's an
Huge benefit.
incredible benefit that they have, and I think that it's a favor. I think it's a favorable schedule based on how it is, but I don't. The end of the season, the last 2 games, they scare me.
Yeah, definitely those last 2 games are scary, and I think Miami because they have the benefit of hosting 2 of their hardest opponents between Notre Dame and Florida. You think 2 of their 3 hardest opponents, depending on what you think of SMU, what you think of depending on what you think of SMU or Florida State's back, maybe not, but Florida and Notre Dame, you host both those games at home is a huge benefit, and then the early half of the season, you have the 2 buys between after Florida going into SMU, where even though you have to travel into hostile territory, you have a week off before you do it. And then after that, a Louisville team that was very competitive against Miami last year, you have a bye week after that FSU game to kind of recover and get back. But yeah, that back half of the season, I think is very scary for Miami just because no buys, straight week after week after week, you're going through these teams, and the last 2 games being on the road, as when the season's at the end, when you're towards the end of the regular season, maybe the team's a little bit banged up, a little bit injured. You're fighting for a playoff spot. You're fighting to play in the ACC championship game, which I think it's so important for Miami to kind of not drop any of these games in the middle. Like you can't drop. Like I know it's tough to say, just go into Tallahassee and win. It's a rivalry game. It's a big game. FSU's not very good. It wasn't very good last year, but still, you can't drop that game. You can't drop anything as you lead up because I feel like kind of as we saw last year, where Miami started to slip towards the end of the year. Um, when the season's kind of winding down and you're fighting for these teams equally want to just kick Miami out of the playoffs. I mean, we saw Syracuse relish in the fact that they were able to kick Miami out of the playoff because of that the late season win. Kind of racking up as many victories as possible before you hit that back end of the season. You're on the road back to back weeks, and you're playing a bunch. You want to kind of keep Miami as high of a record as possible, but you want to kind of string together as many victories as you can. And even though that week 1 in Notre Dame might be tough, that's probably a must win just because it's going to buy you a lot of credit. It's going to buy you by a lot of credit when you get to the late back end of the season.
Yes, 7 straight games is not easy for anyone, and that I mean the I don't like the bye week FSU bye week. I think that's actually really bad for Miami, because I mean end the season with 7 straight games, and the last two being Virginia Tech and Pitt are just not it's not easy for them. They're going to be games that on paper may look fine, but they're not going to be easy games. They're going to be trap games. They're games that you can see Pitt, Coach Narduzzi having like Pat Narduzzi wants nothing more in life than to be a pester to a team. He would absolutely would love to beat Miami. Virginia Tech and Miami have been playing each other for over 40 years. You think they don't want to beat them? Of course they do. So you're looking at that and you're like, okay, those are two really tough games. And I think I'm thinking about this a lot, that if Miami were to start, say their first 6 games, say they went 5-1, and then their last 6 games they went 5-1. Would you be okay with that at 5-1, 5-1? That's a 10-2 season with one ACC loss would set them up for the ACC championship game.
If it got Miami a berth in the ACC championship game, 100%. But that,
Say,
yeah. So
like
if the
say
one of those two losses were the Notre Dame
yeah.
loss or the Florida loss, and in the back half of the season, maybe you lose to SMU, maybe you lose a game to Pitt or Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
I think just because the ACC isn't the strongest out when you're not when Clemson isn't on the schedule, that Miami kind of needs to buy wins, not buy wins, but get some wins to buy some credit with the
Yeah.
AP polls and with the college football rankings, so that they can have honestly, I think there's a way where you would rather get upset in the middle, have one of those games be like a loss to Louisville or Florida State, than one of those be a loss to a top ranked team, in the sense of like, if you have wins against those top ranked teams, that game feels more of like a slip up game, where like Notre Dame's had credit even though they lost week one to blanket on team, but they lost that rough week.
NIU.
And that week, that game against NIU, because they racked up as the season went on, and racked up a bunch of solid victories. They were able to kind of hold their record high and kind of keep themselves up keep themselves afloat in the college football rankings. So I think Miami really needs to win those two, the Notre Dame game and the Florida game,
Okay.
because
Yeah.
I think it's just to establish yourself as a real threat early on, so you can buy yourself that credit later on the season in case you slip up.
Well, so would you prefer then that Miami has a 2-loss ACC season, as in like they have 2 losses within their own conference, and that maybe they get kicked out of, they don't make the ACC championship game? Does then what I feel like then Miami wouldn't even have a chance to even
That's
put
fair.
themselves there.
You got a
If they were to split to Notre Dame and UF, but they were to lose one other in conference game and then finish the season with an ACC championship game, it sets them up for the fact that if they just beat whoever they face, assuming it's Clemson, they're a win and they're in. Obviously,
Mhm.
not an easy game with Clemson, but at least you have that ability where you can control your own destiny. If you're a 2-loss team in conference with Notre Dame and UF games, they're going to look really good on the schedule. They are. They're going to look really good. But there are concerns that you have to trust a committee to say, okay, Miami did lose to these two teams, whatever ACC teams they are. I'd imagine it's maybe SMU and then one of Virginia Tech and Pitt. If you look at that, and then the committee's like, okay, but they did beat Notre Dame, UF, and FSU. That's 3 great wins. Are you able to be like, are they able to just give Miami the at-large bid? That's the question that I always
Yeah,
go
and
back
I
to.
you have a great point in that, because I think I'm kind of flipping towards your side now that I think about it. Just because SMU and Clemson, when they made that the conference championship, like Clemson was pretty much unless they got dominated in that game, a lock, because how are you going to put a team like Miami over Clemson when they didn't, when Clemson's the one that made the conference championship and Miami didn't? I think
Mhm.
that I think the must is to make the conference championship, because but yeah, I'm gonna agree with you there.
Well,
I
so
think you have to
I'd
make the
actually
conference
argue,
championship, and so like if one of those losses are to Notre Dame and Florida or Florida, I think you can't rely on the committee to kind of sneak Miami in, unless they're a dominant team,
yeah.
just flip up wherever. But like,
Well, so I'd argue that it's odd because if Clemson didn't beat SMU, I don't know if they get in. And one thing I do, because they were they finished the season as the number 12 seed, or was it
Hmm.
12 seed? Yeah, they were the number 12 seed in the CFP. That like so you have that, and then you have. I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, like, well, how did the committee do it last year? Where they gave they worried on what the team's wins were, and they kind of ignored what a team's losses were. So Bama had like this strong, really strong reputation because they had beaten LSU and they had played well against Tennessee and Georgia, all those schools. They beat Georgia, but they lost to Vanderbilt, but they lost to whoever. And that kind of was like, that was their argument. And that argument almost got them in. So
Hmm.
I'd argue that if the committee kind of thinks in that same way, maybe you are okay with not making the championship game, but you beat Notre Dame and you beat UF, but you have 2 ACC losses.
Yeah. I just think just the way, it's hard if you're in the committee, but I think just the way they're at times the fact that they're inconsistent, I just think it's it getting into the conference championship. I think is not a lot easy, a lot easier of a way to get yourself a bid than to rely on the committee
Oh yeah,
yourself in. When I think,
absolutely.
especially currently, they're probably going to want to include more Big Ten teams, more SEC teams, teams that are looked as conferences that are looked as stronger than the ACC currently. Where we looked at it last year, we thought Miami was better than the last team. I think it was we. I'm blanking on who was that last team that they let in. But the problem is, were they going to let 3 ACC teams in? Probably not. I think it's probably better for Miami to establish itself and to fight for the conference. And so make sure you win all your conference games and get to that conference championship rather than necessarily taking those out of conference games and winning those, but not coming away with the conference itself because you slip up here and there, and then you don't, you're. I think getting into the conference championship gives you a better pathway to make the playoff than not, but having some extra wins. I think relying on the committee to make the decision is a little bit like you can't really trust them all the time. And unless Miami is a super dominant team throughout the season who just slips up in a couple of games,
Hmm.
then it's gonna be hard for me to fully believe that the committee's just gonna let Miami in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, trying to see who Miami didn't get in when I think so. Miami was the second team out,
Mhm.
and if Clemson loses to SMU, Alabama gets in.
Yeah.
So to me, I agree with that. That if you just control your own destiny, and if you win, you get an automatic bid. I feel like you can't go wrong with that, and I think you can kind of live with that and say, all right, we got the automatic bid. If and you can kind of live with just like you not having as many strong wins, but you at least have the ACC championship. So it's
Mhm.
this balance of like, would you rather control your own destiny or have this committee that you say it was extremely true? They're unbelievably like inconsistent. They have no idea. Like one year it's oh we're ranking on wins, the other year ranking on losses, all that, and they definitely have a bias against the ACC, fair or not, regardless, they don't love the ACC. They don't at all. But they give them a bid. So if you win your conference, you get in. And I think that should kind of be at a minimum what Miami should be focusing on. Because if you win your conference, you get in, you get into the champion, you get into the CFP.
Yeah. I Yeah, that is definitely the route. Like I would take a 10-2 season, losing to not that you would want to, but losing to Notre Dame and Florida, and then winning the conference championship. Then we beat those teams, lose to SMU and Florida State, and we're outside of the conference championship. We're hoping that whoever made the conference championship is a team that's weak enough that with a loss they let us in over them. So like I think it's just winning the conference is a much surefire way to get in than relying or making the conference championship is a much surefire way to get in than relying on the committee
Yeah,
because they
I
are.
think you're always gonna want to control your own destiny. I think
Yeah,
at the
I
end of
think
the day.
controlling your own destiny is very important and like obviously most ideal way go 12-0. I think especially the week one. especially since week one feels a lot more winnable than like originally it kind of seemed, just because we don't know what Notre Dame's QB situation looks like. And I think the way this defense is looking to shape up, getting that week one win, you know, and since you host Florida, it feels a lot more doable to kind of come out to not. It's hard to predict 12-0, obviously, because it's football. It's one game. You can lose any game in college football. Um, but since the first half of the season, debatably your two hardest opponents are at home. And the last, even though that back-to-back road games can be tough, it's not necessarily two high-level teams with Virginia Tech and Pitt. I think there's a very much a pathway for Miami to go 12-0 in a world. But obviously, the SMU game is going to be tough. That Notre Dame's game is going to be tough. That Florida game is going to be tough. Not predicting it necessarily, but it's doable. And I think there's a world where we get the best of both worlds, where you take down Notre Dame and Florida, and you still get the ACC. You still get to be in the ACC championship, and then you have the leeway of we're a 12-0 team. Are you going to leave us out even if we lose the ACC championship? So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of questions that are up in the air. You're right. In an ideal world, you just win your games and you control your own destiny. You don't have to question what kind of 10-2 season you want. You just look at, all right, what games should we just win? What do we have to have? What resume should we have? Like that kind of stuff. And I think that's what Mario is kind of looking at. But it's always an interesting question with the way that the committee has it. Like, if you do win two really good games, but then you lose two in conference games, like how much does that matter to the committee? How much does any of it really matter? So
Yep.
it's just an interesting way to kind of look at it when you look at this, the way that the schedule is, because it's a pretty hard overall. I'd actually call it one of the harder non-conference schedules when you have two top 15 teams. So
Yeah. It's not very often that you're going to see two teams of that caliber. Obviously, a team like Texas has to start the season with Ohio State, so you can't necessarily get everything you want, but it also makes for a lot more fun of a season when you're playing in the bright lights against teams like that. So, and I think like I said, Miami's schedule in parts was very was easy in parts of it, so it didn't necessarily buy them the leverage of being able to drop games like they did against Georgia Tech and like they did against Syracuse, because the rest of their games and the way they played with fire a bunch last year let the committee have a reason to leave them out, just because, man, this team was on the edge of losing a lot more games than they did. They might not be as high, as good of a team as necessarily as people might think. Gave them an out to say Miami would be on the outs of this year, because you lose that Georgia Tech game, you lose that Syracuse game. So, yeah, I think playing harder teams and playing a harder schedule out of conference, in conference, regardless, it sets you up to have a lot more of leeway with the committee, which I think, given their inconsistency, the more leeway you have with them, the more leeway you can kind of, the benefit of the doubt you can get, is definitely helpful. And I think it's definitely helpful to kind of go that route of, having harder games that you can drop because they're harder games, and the committee will look at them more favorably as long as you're competitive. So,
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. But that, I believe, is all we have for today. A little bit shorter of a show, but actually ended up being about close to an hour. So, but I appreciate y'all for as always, for stopping by. We will soon both be back in Miami. Jaden,
Yes.
I believe you're heading down there
Heading down there tomorrow. I'm gonna start the drive, unfortunately, down to Miami. Yeah, but both of us next week will be in a different location, both in Miami.
Yep, we'll both be back in Miami and getting ready for this season to start.
Yes.
A little bit more in-depth look at Notre Dame, a little bit more in-depth look at what this team's shaping up to be like through practices. But that's all for today. But stick around, because you have one quick message from the team.
See you guys next week.
See you next week.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the voice of college football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click Join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.